You're listening to the #1 podcast for nonprofit leaders, getting your nonprofit fully funded. This is the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast. Well, we're so glad to have you back this week for another episode of the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast. My name is Jason Galasinski, and with me, my co-host, Jim Dempsey.
Hey, Jason. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you this week?
Good. Having a good week.
Great. Well, what are we talking about this week?
We are actually going to be talking about writing an irresistible fundraising letter.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And we've actually broken it up into two parts because there's 11 things that we want to share with you about writing an exceptional letter. So this is part 1, where we're going to talk about 6 things in writing. And then part 2, we'll get to 4 things. But before we get into all the great meaty content of how to write an exceptional fundraising letter, if you wouldn't mind subscribing to this podcast, whether you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube, hit that notification bell because we release weekly content for you as a nonprofit leader. Our desire is to help you get fully funded as an organization, and we have the experience, over 60 years of combined experience between Jim and I. Our desire is to give you the tools in your tool belt to help you get fully funded, and there's lots of different tools that we use. We talk about creating a monthly giving program. We talk about end of the year campaigns. We talk about the perfect vision dinner. We talk about leadership styles.
Foundation, board member roles and responsibilities, just a wide variety of things. And subscribing ensures that you don't miss 1 week of content.
Jim, let's dive into how to write an exceptional fundraising letter.
Absolutely. Well, so often over the years, I've had people ask me, Jim, why is it that some letters do well and others don't? Are there secrets? Are there things that make an effective or an exceptional letter? And the answer is 100% yes.
Well, before we get into the secrets, I want to know what qualifies you to be the expert on writing fundraising letters.
Over the last 38 years, I've had the privilege of writing literally thousands and thousands of direct mail letters. In fact, I was for 3 years in charge of all the direct mail for Campus Crusade for Christ, for Cru in the 1980s when development was centralized. I oversee a $4 million direct mail program that we do everything from new name, new donor acquisition to regular communication with people. We probably mail in excess of 2 million pieces, just our particular branch, the campus ministry of Cru. So
that's the thing that you're overseeing. You have a direct influence on how the letters are written and what is said.
Absolutely. In fact, we actually hire a company to produce those letters, but the writing, the content are all the things that I oversee for those letters. They get them out the door. I don't have to hand stuff, seal, stamp 2 million letters. But I make sure that
you oversee the process of getting the letters written
from
and then
start to finish, from concept to writing, editing, and all the production. That is over my overarching control.
Wow. So you know a thing or two about appeals.
I do. Absolutely.
So I would love to pick your brain. I mean, I always say jokingly, kind of when I've talked to nonprofits on the phone and stuff, I jokingly kind of say, if you could knock on the door of a major organization, like Cru or Wycliffe or Young Life, or, these organizations have massive headquarters, right? And you can't typically just walk in and knock on their door and say, can I talk to the CEO of Campus Crusade for Christ? You got to have, special permission to just even get into the building. But, I always tell people, tune into our podcast because this is your opportunity to knock on the door and go straight to the decision maker.
Immediate access to somebody who has firsthand knowledge and experience.
And that's why I think it's so important for you guys to be writing comments and writing questions, because it is literally your way to knock on the door of a major ministry leader and to ask us questions. In this series, we're going to talk about 11 things that make up an exceptional fundraising letter. And you put these principles into practice every time.
Right. Absolutely. And 11 may seem overwhelming, but you'd be surprised just once you get moving along. For me, 11 is that's I'm just thinking about that just naturally.
Right.
Once you get in the habit of writing these letters, you're not having to worry about that every time.
Well, if you stick with us to the end, we're actually going to put these 11 things in a PDF for you to download. So stick with us to the end, and I'll make sure to have a QR code on the screen for you to download those, because I think it would be helpful, to have people have these printed out.
A reference that you could put on your bulletin board in front of your desk and say, am I ensuring that all these items?
Yeah. A checklist.
Love it.
Make sure all these things are in my letter.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, well, let's get into it. What's the first thing?
Well, the first one is an irresistible beginning. So it is so important that you pull people in. It's been found, all research and studies have shown that you have got about a second and a half to get people's attention. You want to make sure, and first of all, I mean, it's tough enough to get people inside the envelope, but once you get them inside, you got to keep them, and you're going to lose them if you don't hit them hard and pull them in quickly. That generally means the number one, a lead-in sentence, phrase, paragraph, or it also means a very powerful PS. Those are the first two things that people are going to read. But right now, we're talking about that irresistible beginning. So I was caught up in a cycle of pornography, or I was addicted to heroin for 20 years of my life until, and then boom, you can go in from there. That would be what I would refer to as an irresistible beginning to a story or program. Yeah. That is such an important component of getting people's attention and keeping people in there.
And that's great, because that leads to thing number 2, which is it gives them a reason to continue to read.
That's right. You want to get them to the point where they get sucked in. All of us have probably read a novel, a book, an article that so captivates us that we can't stop reading. In fact, you think about a book that you start reading as you're getting ready to go to bed, and you find yourself at 2:00 in the morning trying to put that book down, but you're so compelled by it.
Right.
That's what we want. We want to provide a story, and a story is always a good way to draw people in. Because the rule of thumb that we've talked about before, people give to people, justified by the cause. And so telling someone's story, getting a story of a changed life, always pulls people in. We want to make sure that we've got a person's name. If it's a privacy issue, if you work with human trafficking, you work with someone in closed countries, you don't have to use their full name or even their real name. You can put in their name had to be changed because of confidentiality. But give them a name so that you can begin to pull people into the story and make sure it's a powerful story. If you started with, I was caught in the grip of pornography, my life had been one of addiction for 20 years until I ran into a staff member with Crew who literally changed my life with the gospel of Jesus Christ. That is the kind of compelling message that you want to have, and a compelling reason to keep reading.
So this leads to the third thing, which is the specific need. So like, what is the main character's specific need? It's important that element is in there. We don't want to just say, I was struggling with pornography for 20 years and then suddenly something happened. It's like, well, you need to understand, what was their struggle? What were they looking for? What was the motivation?
Well, a good testimony always has 3 key elements. What was their life like before Christ? How did they come to Christ? And what was their life like after Christ? And that also is included in this letter. So as we are addressing the need that they have, we have to paint that picture of what their life was like before Christ. So being addicted to pornography, or being addicted to drugs or alcohol, or being in a downward cycle of depression, those are the kinds of things. And of course, the need, generally, the root problem always really comes down to having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. But sometimes it starts with physical needs, emotional needs. You have to meet some of those needs before you get into the overarching need for a person of Christ.
Right. So then another big piece, the number 4, is that we want to offer the solution.
Yeah. And of course, the solution is, as we know as followers of Christ, is a personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
Right.
Now, that
in the context of a pregnancy center or a homeless shelter, it might be similar.
Well, it is. You've got to meet their immediate need. And that immediate need is to, first of all, maybe determine, are they pregnant? If they are pregnant, are you going to help them with that life-changing decision to save the life of the baby? But ultimately, in many cases, we want to get them to having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So they aren't just back out 6 months later getting pregnant again and keeping that cycle, because a pregnancy center will tell you, as somebody who's been on a board of many pregnancy centers, that cycle just continues where they get pregnant, have an abortion, pregnant, have an abortion.
Yeah,
and
well,
so
whatever it is that we're doing, whether it's, a pregnancy center, a homeless shelter, a Christian school, a camp, recovery, addiction center, marriage and family counseling center.
Right.
Ultimately, we know as Christians that the main problem that we all struggle with, it's not just them, but it's us. It's us too. It's you and me too, that we all are born with a sin nature.
Right.
And we all have this, the word sin is kind of a faux pas word nowadays, but it literally just means it misses the mark.
Misses the mark,
That's all sin means.
Sure.
It just means that we are born off target.
Yes,
like
that's right.
if perfection is God, we tend to sway away from God, and that's because we're born with the tendency to miss the mark. And a lot of people don't understand that.
My understanding, it's an archery term, unless I'm wrong. And when you hit center bullseye, you were hitting the mark. If you missed or got off, that was called a sin.
Right. And you see this a lot in children, especially, no one has to teach a child how to lie.
Right.
No one has to teach a child how to disobey or how to have a temper tantrum.
Right.
You don't sit down with little Johnny at 3 years old and say, now Johnny, you might learn this later on, but let me just teach you, how to throw a temper tantrum when you don't get what you want from mommy, Like, it just happens naturally.
Sure. It's part of her sin nature, right?
It's part of our nature to go off, they're not born to just say, mommy, may I please have, you have to work really hard to get them to do the right thing.
Right.
And you don't have to work very hard to get them to do the wrong thing.
The easy way is that sin nature.
Because of all that, because we know that we are born to miss the mark, we get caught up in all these problems,
right?
And we have this desire to, fill this, longing in our heart for something. We're all longing for something.
Yes.
But ultimately, we know as Christians, the deep longing of our heart is to have that relationship with God.
Right.
And ultimately, no matter what ministry you're involved in, whether it's pregnancy center, Christian school, whatever, right? If we're not leading people to a relationship with God, then ultimately we're not really helping them for eternity.
Right.
We might be helping them temporarily.
Yeah. It's a temporal need. Yeah.
But we're not really helping them find fulfillment with the relationship with Jesus Christ.
Right. And chances are they're just going to get back in the same habit pattern.
Right. And so that's ultimately what every single appeal letter, fundraising letter should always be kind of focused on.
Yeah.
That changed life isn't that you got them off the street, but that you got them off the street and into a relationship with Christ.
Right.
And they became a completely different person.
Right.
Now they're going back into the world, with a different mindset. They've put off the old man and they're putting on the new man.
Yes.
And now they are a mentor.
Right.
For people on the street or, whatever. And that's the stuff that gets people excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of that solution is, what are the strategies, the tactics, the programs and projects we do to help solve that problem? So you're going to unpack, this is a changed life Freddie, Tommy, Mary, whoever the example you're using, here's how their life was changed. And we do things like this. So we feed homeless people. We get women who are caught in the cycle of human trafficking. We help those individuals who are depressed get out of those situations.
Yeah.
And that's all part of this. But we also present, as part of that, opportunities to invest and see other change lives. In a way, it's sort of like that pay it forward, in that where there's other people like this person whose life needs to be changed. And that takes us to the next area, which is the ask.
Yep.
So you've presented the problem, you've presented the solution. Now you're going to present the opportunities that are out there. Remember, it's always been said that every organization has needs, but few have exciting opportunities. And people give to exciting opportunities. Without vision, the people perish, is what Scripture tells us. So you want to make sure that we're putting that opportunity before people. This is not an arm twisting. This is not a making people feel guilty about things.
No, I think sometimes when people listen to us talk about stuff like this, it sometimes can sound manipulating.
Right.
Like, aren't you just like making stuff up?
You're sending people down this path.
You're making up stories, and you're it's all just a sham, and you're just playing with people's emotions.
Manipulation.
And you're manipulating people to try to get them to. And that's not what we're trying to do.
No,
we're not trying to do that at all. The way that we look at it is we are opportunity brokers.
Yes.
Like we do our part and God does his part. Right. But we are literally just presenting exciting opportunities. It's no different than, a business investment opportunity, right?
Right.
If you had the opportunity to get on the ground floor when Apple was just in their garage, and someone came to you and said, hey, Jim, I've got this exciting opportunity. There's these two guys that are creating this thing called a personal computer. Right. And they're going to change the world. And if you invest $5,000 in their company, it could 100x or a million X, that's an exciting opportunity. People get excited about. Well, it's the same thing for eternity, that, God wants us to invest in eternal things. Right. So if the only thing we can take to heaven with us is people. All the clothes on our back, all the houses, all the cars, all the material things,
all gonna burn.
The only thing we can take with us is people.
Yes.
And so that's why, investing in people, in changing people's lives is an eternal investment.
Yeah, exactly.
And so what we're doing in a fundraising appeal letter is we're just making people aware of how your organization is changing people's lives.
That's right.
And then you're giving people the opportunity to participate. Would you like to be a part of helping us, change lives? So it's not us doing everything. We're the super spiritual ones, and you are the low lay person that has to have a regular job. But it's more like, hey, we need you to come alongside of us and to help us. Without your support, we can't change people's lives.
That's right. That's right.
And that's the mindset, right? So we're not making up stories or trying to manipulate people. We're simply just saying, here's an example of what happens when someone gives to our organization. We're able to meet their physical need. We're able to introduce them to a relationship with Christ. They change their whole perspective, their whole outlook in life changes. They have a complete 180 paradigm shift. And then we send them back into the world that they came from. So that they can be a witness and help other people. And then it just creates this positive cycle of change.
Exactly.
And that's what we're trying to do. It doesn't matter if you're in a Christian school, or if you're in a camp, or if you're in a pregnancy center, or you're in, whatever, homeless shelter or whatever, the opportunities are different. What you do on a daily basis is different.
Absolutely.
But the process is the same.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think about Jesus in Scripture. Him, you had, at one point in time, you had a mass of people down in the valley. Brings the disciples and shows them the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. To me, what a tremendous example of motivating them, not manipulating them. He didn't, make them feel guilty that they needed to get into the work of the harvest. He talked about that the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few, and talking about These are sheep without a shepherd, and they need someone to guide them along.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about, is motivation and not manipulation.
Well, and that's what leads into point number 6, which is an irresistible proposition.
Absolutely.
So that's exactly what we're talking about. We want to give them an opportunity to make an impact for eternity that they can't resist.
Yeah. We're really presenting for them the impact that can be made with their gift. Mm-hmm. And it's important. I always talk about the outcome. What is the outcome of a gift? And just like an investor will buy stock because they want to have their return on investment, our partners give because they want to be involved in a very positive and life-altering outcome for people. And that outcome is going to impact eternity. And it's so important that we present that to them.
Yeah, and I mentioned that we were going to have a checklist for the PDF at the beginning of this episode, but that checklist is actually going to be available in part 2 because we want to give you all of the explanation of all 11 steps, and then we will include the PDF for you in part 2. So definitely find part 2. Make sure you get that. You're going to have to listen to the very end, but we're going to have a QR code for you to scan, and that will make sure that you get the summary of all the steps after you watch part 2.
Yes.
We are in the business of helping nonprofits get fully funded. And one of the ways that we do that for you is through our Perfect Vision Dinner course. Now, this course is a 20-week course. And what it is we actually teach you all the development principles, and we give you a step-by-step guide over a 20-week time period to get your organization fully funded. And what we mean by fully funded is that we want to help you move from surviving to thriving. We want to really get your dreams of your organization accomplished, whatever it is. And before you say, well, we're fine, we hit our budget every year and we're okay. Well, there's 2 kinds of organizations that I tend to talk to. The one type is the type that is just starting, or they're maybe running with 1 or 2 employees, or maybe all volunteer, and you're in the surviving stage.
Right.
And then there's another organization that you've been alive for 30 years, 40 years, and you're doing the same thing. You have a routine, you do the same thing every year. You've got lots of staff, but the problem with these guys over here is that they tend to get comfortable.
They get in a rut.
They tend to get in a rut, and they tend to not be growing.
Right.
And so a lot of times when I'm talking to those organizations, the types of things that I tend to hear on the phone is, we really need to change things up because, we're not growing as much, or we're losing partners, we're losing interest. Right. Yeah. And that's because you're getting into a rut.
Yeah.
And
a rut is a grave with the sides kicked out.
That's a good one. Yeah, it is. And so we want to help you get, if you're in this camp, we want to help you get from surviving to thriving. And if you're in this camp, we want to help you get out of your rut. And that we firmly believe that you shouldn't just be combing the internet for the top 20 things of fundraising ideas in 2023 or 2024. Don't get sucked into let's just try things. Don't let board members convince you of their great idea. It's really important that you learn from some of the best fundraising advice out there. And I personally believe Jim Dempsey has some of the best tried and true, test proven strategies out there. 38 years of development, 2,500 dinners under his belt, raising $26 million a year for Crew. You've learned this strategy over time, and we know it works.
Well, I've got a plumb line that's called the development model that we follow, and that is the primary. That's our foundational principles of our program and our effort. And we want to be your one-stop shop. We don't want you to have to go searching all over the internet to find all kinds of fundraising videos. We want to be the single source for you.
Yeah. So if that's something that you're interested in, go to fundraisingmasterminds.net. It's called the Perfect Vision Dinner course. It's a 20-week course. We walk you through all the Plum 9 principles, and then we take you step by step all the way to actually getting you fully funded. And it's a very exciting program.
It is.
A lot of people, when they learn about it, they say, oh, I don't know if I have time and I don't know if I can afford it. And I always say, I don't think you can not afford it. I don't think you have the time to not afford to do this, because ultimately, if you haven't learned this strategy, you're just going to be spinning your wheels and you're ultimately going to get stuck.
Right.
Every single organization out there needs to learn the perfect vision dinner strategy. It needs to be one of your fundamental tools. It's not your only tool, but it's one of your fundamental tools for winning new partners to your organization, keeping them and lifting them to new heights of giving.
Right.
And without this strategy, you're going to be kind of like a drifting person in an ocean.
Yeah.
And it's really, really fundamental.
Rudderless.
Well, Jim, thanks for covering those 6 things in writing an exceptional fundraising letter. We've actually got 5 more things to cover, but we're running out of time.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we're going to divide this into 2 parts. So part 2 is going to be in another video. We're actually going to put a QR code on the screen where you can scan this QR code and it will take you to part 2. And it's really important that you scan this QR code or click the link in the description of this video or podcast description, because this part 2 is not going to be available publicly. We're only making it available to you if you've made it this far in the video and you click that link. That's the only way that you can get access to part 2. So you can't find it anywhere else.
And I have to encourage everyone to make sure you watch part 2. Those 5 last tips and recommendations are some of the most important. In fact, oftentimes they make or break a successful.
Well, make sure you click that link or scan that QR code to watch part 2. And just before you leave to go do that, make sure you subscribe to this podcast, because you don't want to miss another episode coming your way very soon. Jim, thanks again for your expertise in fundraising, and this letter writing process is so needed, because I believe nonprofits will benefit greatly by learning how to write better appeal letters.
Absolutely. Happy to do it. This writing an exceptional letter and telling your story is so valuable and so important for anyone.
Thanks again for joining us at the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Take care.